Isabella Baumfree, also known as Sojourner Truth, as a women's rights activist and abolitionist, has touched many lives. Women in the United States during the late 1800s were not treated well, but because of Sojourner Truth, their values had changed, especially with her Ain't I a Woman speech.
Since Sojourner Truth was born into slavery, she not only changed the lives of women, but she also changed the lives of many slaves. She went to court to fight a case for her son, who was illegally sold to a white man, and after a lot of hard work, she won the case.
Sojourner Truth has affected many lives, and the world today would be vastly different without her decisions, which were a huge turning point in history.
Isabella was taken away from her family and sold at an auction with a flock of sheep for $100 at the age of 9. Years later, Isabella stated, "My mother, when I was sold from her, sat down and wept as though her heart would break."
She was then sold to John Neely. This was immediately a problem because Isabella's first language was Dutch. In Olive Gilbert's narrative of Sojourner Truth, there is a passage about how cruel John Neely was to Isabella.
She is now 9 years of age, and her trials in life may be dated from this period. She says, with emphasis, "Now the war began." She suffered terribly with the cold. During the winter, her feet were badly frozen for want of proper covering. They gave her a plenty of whippings. One Sunday morning in particular, she was told to go to the barn. On going there, she found her master with a bundle of rods, bound together with cords. He had tied her hands together before her. He gave her the most cruel whipping she was ever tortured with. He whipped her till the flesh was deeply lacerated, and the blood streamed from her wounds, and the scars remain to the present day.
Many years later, Isabella told audiences that the way the Neely family had treated her led her to hate white people. She once said, "When I go before the throne of God, and God says, 'Sojourner, what made you hate the white people?' I have got my answer ready."
She was then sold 2 more times, and finally ended up living at John Dumont's plantation. This is where she learned to speak English. At the age of 18, she fell in love with a slave named Robert from a neighboring plantation.
Robert's owner prohibited of their relationship, yet they still met, and she gave birth to a daughter. But Robert's owner didn't approve of them seeing each other again. Isabella kept her daughter, Diana, and continued on with her life without Robert. John Dumont, her owner, then got her married to an older slave of his named Thomas in 1817. They had 4 children, one of whom died young. In 1799, New York was starting to gradually make slavery illegal. Isabella's owner, Dumont, promised to give her freedom 1 year before slavery was made illegal. He then went back on his promise because she had gotten a hand injury and he felt that she wasn't as productive.
She fled later on with her baby daughter, Sophia. She later commented on this, saying, "I did not run off, for I thought that wicked, but I walked off, believing that to be all right."
She didn't know where she was going, so she wandered and ended up at the home of Isaac and Maria Van Wagner. Dumont soon went in search of her and found her at the Van Wagner residence. He told her that she had to come back, and when she refused, he threatened to take away her daughter. Then Isaac said that he would buy her for $20, and Dumont agreed.
Isaac and Maria were very nice to Isabella and insisted that she call them by their real names, not master and mistress. Truth then got to work on finding her son, Peter. She later found out that her son was illegally sold to a slave owner in Alabama. A friend of Isabella's told her about the activist group who helped her create an official case.
Isabella had to go to court against a white man. After months of legal action, she won the case and returned to the Van Wagner's house with her son.
She becomes very religious and meets Elijah Pearson. She soon joins his religious group known as the Kingdom. Elijah motivated Isabella and told her to become a preacher.
After Elijah died, Isabella and another member of the group were accused of stealing money and poisoning Elijah. They were eventually proven to be innocent.
Isabella moved to New York City, but had very little money. On June 1st, 1843, she changed her name to Sojourner Truth and became a traveling preacher, spreading the word of God. Isabella changed her name to Sojourner Truth for a reason. a sojourner is a traveler, someone who has no permanent home. She added truth onto that because even in her early years, she insisted on speaking the truth because it was the right thing to do. In 1844, she joined the Northampton Association of Education and Industry. The group was strongly anti-slavery and pro-women's rights supporters. They provided money for themselves by creating silk. Unfortunately, in 1846, they weren't able to continue to support themselves and they separated with debt.
Sojourner went to go live with one of the association's founders, George Benson. In 1850, she bought a house for $300 close to where George Benson's house was.
In 1851, she went to the Ohio Women's Rights Convention and gave her anti-woman speech. The following excerpt is from Sojourner Truth's anti-woman speech.
That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?
In 1864, Truth traveled to Washington, D.C. because she wanted to meet President Lincoln. Her wish came true on October 29th. She entered the White House at 8 a.m. When she met him, she said, "I appreciate you, for you are the best president who has ever taken the seat." He then signed his name in one of her notebooks. That was not the only president that Truth met. She also met President Johnson and President Grant later on.
Sojourner Truth affected many people, one of which was Shirley Chisholm. In 1968, she was the first black woman to win an election to Congress. Her slogan was, "Unbought and unbossed."
4 years later, Chisholm ran for president. She is the first African American candidate for President of the United States to run for the Democratic presidential nomination. During her campaign in April of 1972, she made a point of visiting the gravesite of Sojourner Truth in Battle Creek, Michigan. This shows the deep mark that Truth made on Chisholm.
There have been many tributes to her memory ever since she has died. In 1997, NASA launched a small 6-wheeled robot vehicle named Sojourner in honor of Sojourner Truth. The Mars Pathfinder spacecraft carried Sojourner on its adventure through space. The rover landed on Mars and started exploring the planet's surface.
Bernice Lowe was a graduate of the University of Michigan and was a drama and speech teacher at Battle Creek Central High School. She became very famous for her research on Sojourner Truth. She was a truly remarkable historian who uncovered lots of information about Sojourner.
So many people have changed their views on slavery and women's rights due to Sojourner Truth. If she hadn't run away from Dumont, she would have never met Isaac and Maria Van Wagner, and she wouldn't have been set free early on. If she didn't go to court to fight a case against a white man, she would have never gotten her son Peter back. She made so many remarkable decisions which have changed the world immensely. She brought out a whole new point of view to slavery. Her speeches on women's rights made men think about how they were treating women. The world would be a very different place without her decisions. Sojourner Truth's actions were a turning point in history.